Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to another episode of The Bared Soul. I'm Steve Young.
I'm Tish Zwicky.
And I'm Rick Stutler.
Today, we would like to talk to you about the topic of rising consciousness. We have talked a little bit before the video about the energy that's in the air with humanity overall right now, currently digging in deep, searching for deeper meaning in life. People are questioning more, people are awakening more, people are tired of the status quo, and there is a rising desire for change in humanity overall. And even with the full moon of last night, if you were to look online at all the verbiage of the memes, it was all about the going within oneself individually and cleaning house, letting go of things that no longer serve purpose, and then stepping forward and looking at what changes wanted in your own life and focusing and directing your energy towards that.
I just want to, because I don't know when this is going to air, so it's July 15th.
Yeah.
So we just had the full moon in Capricorn.
Yes.
So I just want to make that clear in case somebody catches it 2 years from now, and it's 2022. All right, I'm sorry, do you have more to add with that one?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, we were, as Steve had mentioned, talking beforehand and bringing together, well, Steve talking about the full moon, and then Rick had brought something up about Noah's Ark and bringing that into perspective of looking at the Noah's Ark and the flood from the spiritual perspective. And if we were to read it, pulling out of the way in which, from a literal sense and seeing it from a spiritual or a metaphorical sense, it really feels as though that was a period of time in which there was a cleansing, so to speak, going on with society. I mean, it's a great flood, it's water, it's the cleansing aspect. The ark being protected, whereas Noah being close with God, having the conversation, bringing everything that he loved, the people that he loved within the ark, the animals for a continuation of the earth, its survival, and how long what a process that it is, and bringing it to where we are, how there has been, I think at any given time in, maybe the last 100 years or so, some of the older books that I've read, that there has been this shifting into a higher consciousness. It's been, it's sometimes slower, it feels like it's been faster, maybe since 2012, that there has been this shift, and it seems as though the kids that are being born in these, from my perspective of my age, of the younger generations, just being more consciously aware, being more aware, and being into a higher state of consciousness. And for those of us where things were still a little sluggish maybe growing up, kind of just stepping back, we just read through that part of Genesis, feeling, as Steve said, it's like the air is so charged with politics, the division within our country, just the unpleasantries rising up, and it tells us in Genesis that God was upset with man, the evil ways of man, and that so much has just come to the surface for cleansing, and reading through there that it's going to be a long time for this mass cleansing I feel like I just swept it over to you, not Steve, for a mass cleansing to occur. But as this cleansing is taking place, and actually I just thought about COVID when we shut down, and people, and I know that there were some downfalls to that too, and I know that it added for some to the mental health crisis. For others, it was a time for them where they were busy, they were so busy, and they got to learn how to be with themselves, to be more interactive with their kids, with their families. And there were some beautiful things that came out of that too, which allowed us an opportunity once again to rise above it, or to rise up, to get closer with one's own spirit within. And I just find it fascinating.
It was. I mean, I remember hearing things where they were saying, like, I never spent this kind of time with my family. this is great. I mean, fathers and mothers were connecting with their kids, the kids were connecting with them. They had more time to spend together. It wasn't this busy life that we all have. They actually took time to get to know one another, which was good.
It's a crack in the system that we've been operating in on a daily basis over and over again that we all got so used to. And that when that crack happened and people were forced in a divine way to spend their time a little bit differently and even go within, even in the challenging times, if there's battles within the home, for example, that didn't normally exist because people weren't in the home together all the time. It's okay, how do I deal with this inside of me because I have to deal with this with these other people? And that's the rising of the trauma and the conflicts and all of the pieces that are inside of people coming up for the integration and the healing.
And that, I think that every once in a while something like this has to happen so we can evolve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, if things kept the same, we would never evolve. And I just think once in a while, these things pop up. That's just God's way of saying, okay, kids, we gotta do this. It's uncomfortable, it's traumatic, but it has to happen for change.
And that's what a neat perspective, right? To know that or if one accepts that we are just going through this mass cleanse,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a while. But we get to choose if we are going to be like Noah and his ark and take the time to go within, or if we are going to be part of the destruction, or if we are going to be part of the creation, what happens afterward. And I know you want to say something, and I just want to, because I'm thinking about, if after a flood, when the waters recede, there's usually a lot of debris left in the wake. And so at some point, I think we'll shift from the cleansing to the cleanup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then bringing everything to a nice, tidy place until the next leveling up of consciousness, so to speak.
And I think the Noah thing's a great example of that. Because we were talking earlier how it took months for the waters to recede, and they had to, get within and work things out and stuff. Same way here. I mean, this doesn't have to be a disaster like that. It's just we can work with each other. I mean, and things, we've shown that in the last 3 years how we can. It's possible.
And I think we've also come to a place where within the past 2 or 3 years, we've realized that it's very important to be able to maintain a sense of balance amidst the storms. And that the storms of life are going to continue to come. And one of the best ways to operate through those storms is to simply let them come and feel them for all that they are and allow them to pass. Not to cling, not to hold on in the moment and resist the storm and cause potentially even more damage, or what the fallout might be to that, but to know that the storm will pass and there will be a fortifying on the other side of it, of anything that wasn't meant to stay there.
What I think is kind of neat about this too is how we're all becoming aware of our own spirituality. Sometimes you'll have resistance. I actually put one of my cards on the board at work, and somebody actually approached me about it the other day and asked me, what's that all about? And it surprised me. And we had like a 5-minute conversation, but it just, and this guy normally is very, very straight. What's the word I want to use for this guy? He's just like got blinders on. He's just like that. He just doesn't relate to people real well. And I was just floored that this guy talked to me about this.
So noticing the shift in others that you wouldn't necessarily think so.
Which kind of applies to what we're talking about
And
here.
there's a consciousness.
I mean, somebody that just floored me. I never expected that in a million years. And that happened yesterday. It's just like, okay. And I'm sitting there almost stumbling over my words because I was in literal shock. It's, knowing this guy, and it's just like everything's fooey to this guy. And, and I was like, okay. But no, he was asking me questions and I was doing my best to answer them. But being at work, we have a limited amount of time. I said, man, I wish we had more time to talk.
And it takes that internal shift within somebody like that to be open to having that discussion with someone like you in the position that you're in. That there's a resonance, that there's something more there that's beneficial for that person and for humanity and for helping others.
Yeah, and what I thought was neat about that is how everything just came together. It's like wow, maybe he was meant to go in there and read that card.
And it's funny because that brings me to confluence. I'm just saying. It was a possible future subject matter, if not now. Do you feel the confluence?
There is confluence happening. I can see it in my third eye right now of people letting go of all of the layers of clothes, like in our last video, of everything that isn't who they are, and coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And more people are doing so. I see it a lot more online, in groups online, of people just showing up out of nowhere and saying, I feel this thing inside of me and I don't know what it is, but I know it's larger than what we're currently dealing with, and how do I deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
And then other people are jumping in and saying, I feel this way too. And next thing you know, you have these groups just forming organically, and people sharing these ideas of how to handle these situations, how to let go of these traumas or pains or issues and move forward in the most loving ways. And you can feel the energy of the conversation shift and transcend past the normal, mundane, everyday muck, I guess I would say.
But you know what's really cool about that is these people they're gathering up the courage to ask questions. I bet you there's a boatload of folks out there who want to know these things, but are afraid to ask. But then, like confluence, there comes the two rivers that come together because they're meant to come together.
There's that shift that's even letting go of the fears of and insecurities of how I look or how I'm perceived, and just saying, forget that. I am this person. I feel this certain way. And just using that example as a role model, other people step up and say, you know what, me too.
When I would just like to point out right here and now, it's okay to feel that way. If you're feeling that way, step forward and confront it and be a part of it. And then it's very freeing. It can be. So
while we have these bodies as vehicles in this life, this isn't all we are, or even who we are. It's part of our process.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes our ego is so tied to only what the eyes can see, or only what the hand can feel, or only what the tongue can taste or the ears can hear. And we are so much more than that, and we are actually the person that observes all of that. And I use the word person, but to give context to it, we are the thing that observes all of this as we function and as we think and as we feel. And I think a lot more of us are coming to that realization.
And that's a beautiful part about it. People are losing their fear. They're actually stepping forward. And to me, that just lights me up, because it's like, that's what I want to do, is I want to bring people forward to this. And it's really cool how this analogy of Noah and the confluence and everything just kind of blends into what we're talking about.
And part of the beauty to that as well is that there isn't one set in stone path that we're heading towards.
No.
We're all collectively creating it on the fly together.
Because it's up to the individual. As a group, we can't make anybody do what they don't want to do. But if an individual steps forward, it's like, wow, good, this is really working out now.
In a sense, it's like if you want to speak in terms of confluence of two rivers coming together,
Yeah.
it's the universalization of humanity and consciousness coming together in one flow. Everything that doesn't fit the flow falls off into the wayside, and everything that does collectively heads forward and creates a new path.
Well, I mean, the universe finds a way.
Well, and that's where I think the Great Flood,
Mm-hmm.
the cleansing helps to skim off, so to speak, the lower level energies so that one can rise to a higher level of consciousness, whatever that means for them, where any individual is in the moment, as we cleanse, the higher that we may go. And I don't know if I should bring this up, with this video, but you know, sometimes it's when hearing this in a spiritual community where there's I want to make sure that I'm not talking about ego here, that I'm in a higher state of consciousness, so you know, I know better what I'm talking about than somebody else, because that is very much ego to me. Or, you know, we can't have our own thoughts. We can't be forceful about our thoughts or opinions because then we're not spiritual or of a higher state of consciousness. I mean, it's when we're the confluence, when we're all kind of riding that wave, so to speak, together of it. To me, I see it as love. I just see it as love. I see the cleansing. So whether it's a flood of oneself or if it's a flood of humanity, and to get that cleansing off. But to do so, if we're doing so from a state of the true, what I believe, and so I guess it's open to interpretation, obviously, but the true flow of love, the true flow of spirit, then it doesn't, that I can't stand and say that I'm better than you or I know more than you do. It's grabbing hold of your hands and, you know, let's flow together kind of a thing. Am I making sense at all?
Yes.
To make sure that we're not operating from a sense of ego,
Yeah.
that it's operating from a sense of love for humanity, love for spirit, love for the earth.
I mean, there was a talk that I listened to yesterday that essentially brought up how the mind still has a purpose. You know, the human mind still has a purpose. It's very functional in this physical world. It helps us analyze, it helps us go through logic, and that's very much needed here. But we also have our higher mind, our intuition, that helps us drive consciousness higher and helps us come together through love. And again, the confluence of that inner being and the human being together
If there's another confluence.
is the optimal path for moving forward with humanity. And
Oh, no. Hold on. Because I'm seeing it in my mind, right? My human self, my spiritual self. Well, if my spiritual self is saying, oh, love, but my human self is like, people suck and, you know, I don't want to do this, I don't, you know, just real negative and lower level kind of energies, I'm no longer in confluence. So as I rise above and cleanse with the of my human self, then coming back to that confluence.
and we feel the dissonance when that confluence isn't there between our inner being and our physical selves. Because that disconnect often makes us feel lost, isolated, lonely, alienated,
Wobbly.
depressed.
Yeah.
And that's a feeling within us internally, not including anybody external to us. And oftentimes we get lost in the why do I feel this way? When you're in alignment and you're in confluence with your inner being, there's no deviation. There's no separation there.
It feels good, the eyes are straight, and you feel, it feels good.
Yeah, so with the rising of consciousness that's happening, I personally feel that a lot of the egoic-led beliefs, the systems, the structures, they're all going to change. And much like has been talked about, not overnight.
I think that's what we're experiencing right now.
Sure.
From a larger, if we were to rise above it to get a fuller picture, yeah.
And we don't exactly need to know what the end goal is. We only know that certain things aren't working and need to change. And the rise in consciousness is going to automatically take care of a lot of these things. What's not meant to stick around is not going to stick around.
Mm-hmm. Washed away. I keep seeing, I did a reading recently, and the person that had passed had showed me this picture, this visual, which with the recent pictures of NASA that came out with that Webb telescope, James Webb telescope, the first picture that they had shown was like the picture that this particular spirit was showing me. And I bring that up not from an ego sense, like how cool am I, but like how cool is that, right? The spirit was bringing me up of this is what I get to see, this is what I get to experience. And that is not just that, but a guidepost of how much more there is, and seeing those pictures were just phenomenal. But knowing that, this is, at least from my belief system, this is just, this particular experience is Tish. That my spirit has yet so much more to experience. But I'm going to be grateful of my physical life here. If I'm alive, I may as well enjoy it, right? Or make the best out of it. And to be able to, touch people by having a human body, by being able to do that. What a beautiful thing that we get to do.
And that gives you a glimpse, speaking of those pictures, of, in a sense, what we're closed off to at the level of consciousness we're at, but what we're capable of seeing and feeling and doing when we raise the consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And
the beauty in those pictures.
And I truly believe it's a matter of us being closed off or under the water, that all we have to do is let go and rise above. It's nothing that we need to do something to attain something.
When you said that, I felt like the water's just lifting me up. I don't have to do anything. Mm-hmm. One could see God or the universe as being the life float, so to speak, just helping you rise as it's washing away.
If anything, humankind practices closing off and practices resisting under the current consciousness that is starting to fall away. And it's a matter of just letting go and letting ourselves rise up to new heights.
I mean, think about it. We're on video talking about Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's still going to be some people that'll hear this and be like, oh, that's just wrong. But we're at that point in consciousness where we can question things. We can look at things from a spiritual, a metaphorical sense as opposed to a literal sense, to see what the sages were trying to tell us at the time.
And it makes a lot more sense. If you try to look at it from a metaphysical point of view or a metaphorical point of view, because I think when you just look at things literally, you just lose something there. It's just, when you open up to that, it's just like, yeah, now it makes sense.
We're going through another cleanse.
Mm-hmm. Just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So be protected.
Oh, yeah. Got a little black stone on here.
We know when we speak about things in a literal sense, we're limited to how the human mind can comprehend that. And the human mind can only comprehend based off of things it's already been exposed to. Mm-hmm. So you hit a cap at a certain point of, this makes sense or this doesn't. But then we have that internal feeling inside that says, I'm resonating with something deeper, mm-hmm. something beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's following those instincts. instead of shutting them off, to go within. You know, Noah, he was within the ark. He was within for all that time, you know, and going within and honoring that place.
And not only that, I think the three of us here reached the point in our lives where we do question things. It's just something, it's like, no, that doesn't make sense anymore. This does.
And you know, with going within, the individual work that you're doing is not creating separation from humanity, because this individual work that you're doing internally is for the collective consciousness of humanity. And by doing the work internally, it reflects externally.
Because it's, to me, that's where we meet, is internally, and then the outward manifestation of that through the physical.
And the power of knowing that that's what you control is the internal work of letting go of the resistance, of releasing the ego and checking it at the door, of tapping into that intuitive, innate energy that you have inside of you that drives you or lights you up to certain things and certain people and certain places.
What you just said just kind of made me smile. It's like, yeah, we need to separate the ego, because that's where the separation is with the ego. It's not with us or God or anything, it's the ego. The ego is, in my view, the separation. And that's where it is. I mean, so, I don't know, I'm just very, very happy that, you know, at a point in my life, I realized that and the light came on, it's like, okay, this makes perfect sense.
And I think for a lot of people that we've had to experiment with this. Over time, we'd question something and say, well, I'm feeling differently inside than what these people are telling me life is supposed to be like. Well, what if I start to follow this feeling? What happens? Did I get hurt? Did I die? No. Maybe there's something to that.
Yeah.
And then having that bravery to trust within yourself, within that internal feeling that you're having.
Because it is bravery. Because when you're going against something you've been taught your whole life, dogmatically taught, to take that extra step, that takes a lot of courage. And then to face it and say, yeah, okay, this makes perfect sense. It's okay to do that. I mean,
And to open up.
Yeah.
And then let the waters cleanse you.
You know, oftentimes we fall trapped to shutting off our ears when we hear cliches like being outside the box. When you hear stuff like that enough and you're like, people are just saying gibberish. But this is in every way and shape and form true, that the rising of consciousness is getting outside of the box and saying there's more than just what's in this box. It's not to negate what's in the box, but it's to include everything else.
Yeah. I mean, great thinkers, all in humanity, to the great thinkers, they thought outside the box. They didn't accept the norm. And sometimes I think it's a good idea not to accept the norm, question things. You know, it'll come to fruition, and it's like, yeah, okay.
And if something else, you've learned something.
Yes.
You've learned something new.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would say if you are somebody who's feeling that internal nudge to go in a different direction than you've been living, no matter what it is, to start exploring that and trusting into that internal sense that's inside of you. Because chances are you're being led that way for a reason.
Absolutely, I couldn't stress that more. It's a perfect way of putting that. We've all experienced that. We've all had different lives in our past, and then something happened one day. It's like, wow, you know, you look at the trees, they're greener. You look at the grass, it's greener. The sun's brighter. Everything, it just changes. You know, and that's from taking the courage to step forward and explore. There's nothing wrong with it. Like you said, we're all sitting here, nothing happened to us.
And even if things do happen to us, they might tend to happen more of a metaphorical way, of paradigm shifts in our energy and how we think and how we operate on a daily basis.
And that's the only way humanity will ever change, is the
And the
paradigm.
dying off of the old, making
Way for the new.
right, which again, back to the floodwaters, right?
Yes.
And going within and releasing what the old belief systems, the ways that we've been seeing the world or ourselves that have kept us contained or kept us unhappy, to just put that out into that water that's flowing over all of us metaphorically. This is our, because most of the full moons are like the release and the release and the releasing, so putting that up into the moonlight, into the flow that is happening, so we can feel lighter
And the universe leads you to
and
that.
go higher.
The universe does lead you to that.
If one chooses free will.
Yeah, I mean, but then that's the resistance.
And we always get opportunities, that's a great thing too, like
True.
it's free will, so at any time we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all one day.
And once again, we'll also state that you're not alone.
No, you won't.
You're not alone in feeling this way. You're not alone in experiencing these shifts that are happening, these changes that are happening. This is happening. This consciousness is raising.
And not only that, you're gonna find out, I mean, from my personal point of view, my life's much better. Life is just much better all the way around.
Even from a perceptive shift, like nothing literal could have changed in your day other than your perception, and you
And
will
that's
feel
big, that's a big
you
thing.
will feel better.
Even a small shift in the long term really affects the trajectory, and then a big shift even more so.
Yeah.
Because once you shift that perception and you see things from a different perspective, you'll start to take different steps.
And it's okay to do that. Don't hurt.
And oftentimes it's like the confluence where it just feels natural too. Other times it's like, ooh, this is a little weird, but it feels good. Other times it's like, it just feels so natural.
It does.
Shift.
And I will challenge anybody who says that there's nothing in life that is effortless, because I've experienced enough things in my life that have happened effortlessly to say that there is a lot of shifts and changes and risings of consciousnesses in our lives that can happen effortlessly. You do nothing other than let go and watch positive things happen.
Absolutely.
All right. Final
Well,
words?
I think that's it.
I think I'm done.
Until next time, we'll see you again for another episode of The Bared Soul.
Thank you.
Namaste.